when I look back at my life, I want to look back and say, man, I gave that a shot. I put everything on the field. And it's interesting. I was teaching at Matt Wilbur's domination workshop. And interestingly enough, and what I shared from a vulnerability perspective, I can actually be okay with not winning. The only caveat is I need to look back at my performance and know that I did every single thing possible. There was no stone that was not unturned. If I can say that, I'm good. But if I can't say that, if there was one more thing I could have done, there was one more rep I could have made, if there was one more call I could have done, if there was one more presentation for my team that I could have executed that put my team and our team in a winning position, and I didn't do that, I can't live with that.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms. Here's your host, Bryce Henson. Hey friends, welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast. My name is Bedros Keuilian, and I am not your typical host that you see here. The co-host here is Bryce Henson today, and he's also the gentleman that I'm going to interview today. So Brycey, welcome to our show, and this is pretty cool that I get to interview you as the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, and of course, I think our audience deserves to know who you are and where you're from and what your background is and how it is that we ended up working together, because while pieces of that story exist, that I'm not sure we've ever done a deep dive.
Well, let's go.
So thanks for your ability to be transparent today.
You got it.
All right. So now I didn't know this when I met you. You know, you look at you, blonde haired, kind of greenish blue eyes. I was like, oh, California dude, right away. Boom. Right. And then I was shocked to hear that you're from the Midwest. Where specifically were you born, and where are you from?
Well, I usually say I'm from the Midwest, which would be true, but to your point about being born, I was born in a suburb. I was actually born in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. I used to talk like this when I was a little boy.
No kidding.
And I lived that way for the first 10 years. My mom's from the Midwest originally. That's where we went back. She graduated from Michigan State. She got a job in Texas, transferred to Atlanta, and that's where she met my dad, who was in the military. And I guess I'll story tell to my time in Michigan. Before I do, the first 10 years were a bit volatile in the life. Volatile. And it turned out to be a superpower. And that was the reason, primary driver for that, was my father was a drug addict. He was addicted to gambling, also alcohol. The trifecta, not necessarily conducive for a good family upbringing.
Sure.
And we lived that way, very volatile, as you would imagine, when drugs and alcohol are in the house. And my mom's sweetest lady in the world, Donna, this Midwestern lady, just wanted to raise a family and do good by people, which is absolutely incredible. And unfortunately, she just picked the wrong guy. But fortunately for us, had 3 kids, and I'm one of them, and be able to chart my course and path in life. And how we got out of Michigan, out of Georgia, as the story goes, my father used to gamble. For us at the time, a few $1,000s was big swings of money. Sure. And there was chaos going on in the household, and drugs and alcohol and gambling, and that was kind of a common thing. And there was arguments that broke out, most times verbal. But as the story goes, one Sunday night after a weekend bender that my father had been out of the house for a few days, and he came back in a drunken stupor and lost about $5,000 betting on the Atlanta Braves game, which at that period of time was a lot of money for our household. So when he came in, my mom exchanged some few choice words, not really too excited at his behavior, as you would imagine. Sure. And that verbal argument turned violent. And before you know it, my mom was running upstairs, escaping my father's grasp, but ultimately found herself on a bed with my father choking down on her neck. And by the grace of God, after a few seconds of this, my sister, my brother Barrett and I weren't in the house, but my sister kind of ran through hearing all the commotion. And in my drunken stupor, my dad looked up and he got disoriented, and my mom slipped his grip. Her knees hit the ground, and like a bat out of hell, she ran out of that house, grabbed my sister, and never looked back again.
Wow.
And that was we just shot an episode called Flip the Switch, but you talked about flipping the switch. And that was the switch that got flipped in my mom's life to realize, okay, enough is enough. I've been living this way for a long period of time.
Yeah.
I got to get my kids out of this particular situation.
And you were 10 years old when this happened.
Yep.
In Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this, but I don't know if the audience knows this, and I think it's worth sharing. Where do you fall on the pecking order of your siblings?
So I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
My brother Barrett's the middle, and my sister Emma's the youngest.
Yeah. And so mom decides that you guys are going to escape to Michigan because that's kind of home for her, right? At least didn't her mom live there?
She did. And thankfully, due to my grandma who's passed in 2007, but without her, we would have probably ended up in a shelter or some sort of really bad situation. So the reason that we went to Michigan is my mom grew up there. My grandma was living there, and she was an empty nester. She had, long got her kids and grandkids out of the house. Yeah. So I look back at the situation from her lens, which is just crazy actually to think of. Like
from grandma's lens.
From grandma's lens, which is she's just an angel.
Yeah.
She's 75 at the time, empty nester, living by herself. And before you know it, literally within a few days, you have Donna, my mother, and 3 kids from the South, basically, hunkering down in her house. Yeah. And she lived in a very humble, but very well put together, tiny little tract home, 3-bedroom. So she had a room. My brother Barrett and I had shared a room. And then my mother Donna and my sister Emma shared a room and actually a bed for the better part of 10 years, which was, challenging to say the least from my perspective, and just, and you use this terminology I picked up from you for the better part of that latter decade. We used to run out of money before we used to run out of a month, and the nervousness, the credit cards, the debt collectors, all that kind of stuff. And it was a tough landing, but thankfully with family support, it taught me a lot of lessons in that process.
So as the oldest male in the house, now you guys are in Michigan under grandma's roof. Did you feel any level of responsibility or pressure on you when you would see mom under duress because of the financial constraints, et cetera?
From day one.
From day one.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talked about this you in a previous episode that we shot together. Was you just always had this feeling, this burden of leadership, this feeling that you were meant to do something more. And very candidly, I've always felt that when that situation happened, even beforehand. Actually, I've always felt a duty, obligation, responsibility to my siblings, to my mom, to my family, as the provider.
And so, with that, do you feel like? Well, I can't say that. Because your brother's an entrepreneur as well. I was going to say, do you feel that's what kind of catapulted you towards entrepreneurship?
I think it could be. I wouldn't say Barrett's a purebred entrepreneur. He's a purebred executor. And he saw opportunity and saw the path that I laid and realized, okay, this is a good opportunity. I can execute that.
Good point.
But I think from me, my perspective, absolutely. And I realized, there was a lot of confusion and frustration and doubt and, just lack of clarity during that period of time in my life. But I realized that, money and success is an important tool. And if you don't have that tool, then there can be repercussions to pay.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment, I remember being like 10 years old, like playing in the playground, being frustrated, confused. I used to tout like this. So when I moved to Michigan for the first 6 months, like all the kids would, Bryce, say yellow, this, that, and the other, right?
Yeah.
And that confusion and frustration led me to the point. I remember looking at my hands. I'm 10 years old. And I said, you know what, Bryce, if it has to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
And that drive was factory installed, but really released at that period of time to really set the trajectory for a life worth living.
So right around that time then, when you're in Michigan, you're entering middle school, on your way to high school. How does your upbringing change from how life was in Atlanta, where you never know how dad's going to show up in terms of what state of mind he's going to be in? Now there's probably more stability in Michigan, I imagine.
There is.
How does your upbringing change in terms of sports or school or activities?
Yeah, no, great observation. It was very volatile to very stable on one hand, but very overwhelming because, my mother, Donna, she's the sweetest lady ever. she had 3 kids that she didn't really sign up to, be the provider and to take care of them in that way. She did. She did everything she possibly could. My siblings and I are so grateful for that. But there was not a lot of financial, offering there, if you will. So very early on, I realized, okay, I'm going to have to make a go at it. And when I was 12 years old, the working age in the state of Michigan, you have to be 14, but I found a loophole that by the age of 12, actually, you could beginning refereeing soccer games, and actually you could start enrolling in the course when you're 11 years old. So within 18 months of me moving to Michigan, I saw an opportunity actually and asked my mom if I could be, taken and given, class and coursework to become a soccer referee, which then passed the boards. And when I was 12 years old, she'd be driving me around, and I was making $15 an hour cash, more than her at the period of time, which is funny. She still finds that's funny to this day.
So you really became the breadwinner pretty quick.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah.
So it was stable, but it was also confusion, shame. And I guess the one point that I want to bring out, I'm very grateful for this, but we had no means, or very little means, I should say. And aside from the household support my grandma could provide, my family, extended cousins and aunts and uncles who all lived in Michigan, helped the cause as much as they possibly could. Not from a financial perspective, but basically from a support perspective, with the exception of my uncle. And my uncle is a tax attorney. He's in his 80s today, sharp as a button. And he didn't provide financial support to the family.
Wait, say sharp as a button?
Sharp as a button.
Huh.
Yeah.
I never heard that phrase before.
Sharp guy.
Yeah.
And or a tack, probably. I think it's the same. Yeah. Sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
But in any case, he decided to invest in private school for us, which was interesting. We didn't know this until I was 18 and graduated high school. But it was a really interesting situation because we were clearly not in an economical situation to go to school with private school kids, but then there we were. So we felt out of place and, not belonging, if you will.
Wait, let me understand something. So this uncle, while everyone else is pitching in and helping out, cousins, uncles, aunts, etc., this uncle's not helping out, but am I hearing this correctly? But he ended up, what he was doing actually was saving up money to put you guys in private school.
Well, he was successful financially, so he didn't necessarily have to save that. That was part of his offering, if you will. And he did help. He's a very quiet, introverted type of guy. So he's not the type of guy that's going to give you the pat on the back, this, that, and the other.
Sure.
But from a sports perspective, always did what he could. But from a financial perspective, did not provide the family financial assistance, with the exception he really believed in proper schooling and education. So he put us in private school, which we had no idea at the time how it was being funded.
I've known you for all these years, and I had no idea you went to private school.
Yeah.
This is. I'm glad we're doing this. What was your first job that you really enjoyed, that you liked? I'm not talking about like a sales job or whatever. Like as we became adults, like maybe before the age of 20, did you have like a job that you're like, man, this was really a fun job? Like I'll give you an example. As much as I talk shit on it, like my all-time favorite job before really going into the adult world was working as a bouncer at a gay bar, right? Because I just saw the most colorful people and the most like craziest way, drunk and stuff. And it was just like I could always think back and be like, time would go pretty quick at that bar. I didn't make a lot of money, but it was a fun job, Yeah. What was yours?
Dude, I can't give you a fun job that I had, but I can give you one that I hated.
Okay. Let's go completely the other way.
The opposite way. As I was graduating from high school into college, I got a job delivering the newspapers, and actually made good money, because it was all cash. So in the grand scheme of things, and I figured out a way. I had this little schloppy car, but basically it can get through the route, in half the time that the other carriers could do, and made twice the amount of money, and it was cash. And so had from that perspective, it was awesome, but it was so monotonous. I memorized the route, so I'm literally driving. It was the exact same process every single day. I'd go in there, load up my car at like 3 a.m, go deliver the papers. I literally knew the route like the back of my head. It was so monotonous day in and day out. And at that point I realized like I am freaking doing something better for myself. And I had already planned, made that decision a long time prior, but that was a really line in the sand to be like, get me out of where I'm at and on to bigger and better things.
So then you fast forward, in life, and you meet this beautiful woman named Tatianna.
Yeah.
Now, I know the story, but it'd be pretty neat for our audience to know how you ended up meeting Tatianna.
Dude, it's straight out of a movie. So growing up, when I moved to California in 2004, and I've been here since, so I'm more Californian than I'm not at this point. But I was inspired. I had a few friends, actually a buddy of mine who's French and English. His dad is from Paris and his mom is from London. He grew up half and half. And I thought it was really cool. He's like this international guy, spoke a few different languages, and was always a huge Kobe Bryant fan as well. And most people don't know this, but Kobe Bryant spoke fluent Italian for 6 years. And when he was 6 years old to 12 years old, his dad was a professional athlete, not good enough to make the NBA, but basically played in the European League. So he lived there for 6 years. And I always was a California guy. You mentioned that I look California, blonde hair, blue eyes. I always just had this call to California ever since I was a little guy. Loved the Lakers, and I love to watch Kobe Bryant dominate as he did. But then always I'd watch till the end, and depending on the time, the Italian press would always try to sneak an interview with him. So I was the coolest thing, this icon who dominated sports, like full eagle, driven, A-type personality, champion at every level. And then afterwards, he'd sit back and basically speak this like beautiful language of Italian. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I put this in the back of my mind. I was like, you know what? I want to live in another culture, learn another language. And I didn't know what that was until the summer. I should say summer. It was the summer, but it was actually our winter. It was Christmas time, 2008, and Brazil's in the southern hemisphere, and we decided to book a trip with my buddies and went to Rio de Janeiro for a week, and then a couple other cities in South America, and it was just love at first sight. For whatever reason, Brazilians, like the way they speak, they don't speak, they actually sing to each other. There's just this rhythm in the culture, and they're incredible at soccer, or futebol as they call it. So it was just love at first sight. So after having that experience, just on vacation for week. Also, too, it was opposite hemisphere. So at that point, I've been living in California, but 10 years in Michigan, during Christmas, I'm shoveling a foot of snow. So I'm like just PTSD from like snow. Right. I show up in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It's, third week of December, sunshine, just an incredible experience, a blazing summer. So I was like, you know what, this is it. I want to come back. So that all said, I went back to California. I was working in a sales position. The company is based in San Francisco, and he's my first mentor, as I talk about, just incredible visionary. And I'd worked with the company for about 5 years. And about 6 months in, I pitched him. I said, hey, Eric, this sounds crazy, but I'm just called, to live in a different culture, learn another language. And I went to Brazil last year, and I want to go back. And previously, how I decided to land on the city of Florianopolis, which is an island in the very south, I started asking some Brazilian friends that I had in California. It's like, hey, I just had this awesome experience in Rio de Janeiro, but if you were to live in Brazil, what place would it be? And I never heard of it at the time, but there's this island called Florianopolis. So Ed Milet, your buddy, talks about the reticular activating system, the RAS. I never heard of Florianopolis before, but in that 3 to 6 month window, when I started, connecting with Brazilians, I just heard Florianopolis. In fact, Gisele Bündchen, Tom Brady's wife, spent vacation there in 2004 and kind of put it on the map. So this all say to kind of put a bow on this as I, decided to end up meeting Tatianna. I was out to dinner with a buddy of mine that lives in Corona, just down from the street from HQ, and we're having sushi dinner, and he worked for American Airlines for a period of 10 years. So he had traveled all over the world, and somehow Brazil got brought up. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I just went there last year. I just talked to my boss. I'm actually looking to go back. Went to Rio de Janeiro, yada, 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 just explaining my awesome story. And he was all geeked out too, so he jumped in. He's like, dude, Rio's awesome. I had a great time, but there's this island in the very south, 47 beaches. It's absolutely beautiful. And literally like a movie, we both said Florianopolis. And I'm like, dude, something is calling me here. So to put a long story short, I decided this is where I want to go. So about 2 weeks before I left, of course, I told my immediate family.
How long after that conversation with your buddy at the sushi restaurant did you then leave for Florianopolis?
That was probably May of 2010. I got on a flight first week of August of 2010. So it was a few months after.
Okay, about 3 months. Yeah.
A few months. It needed some time to put everything together. And he actually introduced me to someone who I rented a house from, to get going. So
this is pre-Airbnb and all that
Pre-Airbnb, yeah. This is a minute ago. But in any case, I send out an extended email to all my family and friends and say, hey, this is what I'm doing and why. And B, I kid you not, 7 days before, I get a call. And he wasn't even a direct friend. He's an acquaintance. He was a friend of a friend. And he's like, hey, Bryce, this is Steve, Mark's buddy. I was like, oh, what's going on, Steve? He's like, dude, Mark just told me you're moving to an island called Florianopolis in the south of Brazil. I'm like, dude, I'm going next week. Why do you ask? He's like, this sounds crazy, but I went to college with a girl and she lives there. She's from there. I can put you in touch, and she speaks English. So I was like, sign me up. So he puts me in touch. We exchange some, contact information and communication. And his friend says, well, depending on what time you actually get in, my schedule is pretty flexible these days. I potentially come pick you up from the airport. So sure enough, the day comes. I travel 7,000 miles, 3 flights, the other end of the world. I drop myself off on the island of Florianopolis, and my wife, Tatianna, is there to pick me up. Stop
it. I'm getting goosebumps right now. That's crazy. That's the friend that he was referring to, Steve was referring to.
That's it.
Ain't that something?
And
was it like instantly you knew, or was it you spent time with her? Did she know right away, like, look at this hunk of man? How did that whole thing go? Like, everybody wants to know.
Totally. She's a beautiful girl.
She is. She's spectacular.
She gives me a hard time to this day because I was going down there and I wasn't looking for a girlfriend as the top of my agenda, if you will. So I think she had it out for me initially. But, she was my lifeline. She lived in the Midwest. She went to school in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, like, I'm down here in Brazil, like, play it cool, Bryce. Don't do anything to kind of screw anything up. She speaks English. She can kind of show you around.
Sure.
So it was probably a few months where we hang out maybe like once a week, and she'd, take me out, visit her friend, show me the city. And then probably, this was in August when I first met her. It wasn't until probably November timeframe we started dating, and then that was that.
How cool, man. That's awesome. And today you guys are business partners and happily married. It's just beautiful, beautiful relationship you guys have. I love that. Let's shift gears here for a moment. Let's talk about leadership from your lens. What does leadership mean to you?
I love John Maxwell, New York Times bestselling author, his definition of leadership. And for me, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm infatuated with influence. And B, you don't even know this, but at my future stage, I want to continue to study it. I have a vision for a show, What is Influence? And basically, like, every single episode talking about, what influence is, from being able to speak on stage, from being able to orate, from being able to have a one-on-one conversation, be able to write copy, to be able to lead. What are the foundational things that make influence? And I think that's just an incredible skill in business, but in life, because if you can influence yourself first and foremost, which is otherwise known as self-mastery or discipline, and then you can do that for others, assuming your heart's pure, you can lead a life well lived. Yeah. And for me, when I look at it, not only is it influence, but really to kind of put a bow on it, why I love leadership is I take a step back. And if we have a mission, our mission at Fit Body Bootcamp is to inspire fitness and change lives every day. We want to make a big, big impact as we are. Leadership is a tool. And with strong leadership, you can actually leverage other people, good-hearted people, towards a common goal, towards a common cause, and make a giant impact. So for me, it's a tool to do that.
How do you see the difference between leadership and management?
Yeah, that's a great question. And interestingly enough, I wouldn't even say I'm that strong of a manager, but I'm a strong leader. Leadership to me is the principle of directing change and growth. I mean, really, at the end of the day, we live in a volatile world, an evolving world. Things that, the only constant is change. And a leader is able to drive and direct change. And that's really at the core of leadership, where management isn't necessarily so much about change, it's about staying in a defined system. So a leader creates the system, whatever that system is going to accomplish the goal. A manager makes sure that system is followed, makes sure that, within those lines and constraints, that system is followed. And it's a different type of skill set. Both are important, but I typically gravitate to the directing change and influence versus staying within a line.
And you do that well. I could just think back of several things, one of the bigger ones being the CAP coach, of how you literally influenced, changed, created a system as a leader, and then how the CAP coaches manage our franchisees and their success so well because of the leadership vision that you had of what CAP coaches would be. Something that I I'd completely overlooked and was just completely blind to. And I remember where I was. I was at some airport somewhere, and we were on a phone call, and you're like, hey, when you come back, I'm going to tell you this. I'm like, Bryce, it sounds too exciting. You got to tell me now. Do you remember that? And, and I was just like chomping and like, holy shit, he's onto something with these cap coaches. Anyways, yeah, you're a fantastic leader. And quite honestly, I don't believe we all need to aspire to manage. If we do our job well as leaders and create great systems, people will be self-managing, and I think we see that around here, in this building. I don't think anyone's specifically managing people. Everyone's just kind of self-managing because the systems are very clearly set out to do that.
What's up, my friend? Bryce here. Now, you might know me as the co-host of this podcast and the CEO of FitBody. But what many people don't know is that I actually began my journey as a FitBody franchise owner. Now, being an owner, I wake up every day absolutely doing what I love. I live my passion. I help people transform their lives and have both financial and personal freedom. And it's for these reasons and many more that other owners join the brand and open their own FitBody locations too. So if you're looking to build a highly profitable business, take charge of your life, and create an impact in your very own community, then opening a FitBody gym might be a perfect fit for you. Now, to see if a territory is available in your area, as we have very limited spots due to our incredible growth, go ahead and visit our website at fbbcfranchise.com to complete an application. Well, thanks, and back to the show.
Shifting gears again. Now that you have the coveted seat as CEO of FitBody Bootcamp, a seat that I so proudly sat in and valued and was such a big part of my identity, and truth be told, there was not a single person that I'd come across before meeting you that I would have seen in the CEO seat. In my mind, everybody was like, oh, second in command, like a VP or a chief operations officer or something like that. I never really saw anyone else in that seat. And I've told you this 100 times, that I believe that you lead and cast a better vision for FitBody Bootcamp than I ever did. And but with that seat, heavy as the head that wears the crown, as the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp, just as an entrepreneur, as someone that's responsible for so many moving parts, how do you manage and handle stress and the pressures of the day-to-day of running a mega business?
Yeah, it's a good question. And do I have it all figured out? No, but taking action every single day. I'm a product of my product. We share the same, brotherhood. We got into fitness because we want to change in ourselves, more confidence, more energy, more enthusiasm. So till this day, I'm grounded in my fitness. I think the day I stop lifting weights and running and physically challenging myself, the day I'm no longer qualified to be the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp. So from a stress perspective, from a mindset perspective, from a clarity perspective, also from a moral authority perspective. I mean, we love fitness. It's a tool to achieve a higher version of yourself. And without fitness, things would be different, but that's certainly a huge stress reliever. The other one I've grown accustomed to is a nice polar plunge every morning. So with the new house that Tatianna moved in in fall of 2021, we have a pool. For the longest time when I moved in California, I was like, hey, I want a pool and a hot tub. And certainly I use them both religiously.
Does it have the best combo ever?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. But what I've learned is cryotherapy, cold shock treatment, just absolutely incredible health benefits, reduces inflammation, reduces, or increases anti-inflammatory response in your body. But the biggest thing for me is the mental output, the mental clarity that I receive from like a 3-minute, submersion in very cold water, 45-degree water on a daily basis.
Do you do that in the mornings or evenings?
Always mornings. So yeah, I go to boot camp on Mondays and Friday mornings now because I live about half an hour away, and then I'll lift weights throughout the course of the week. And then always, as soon as I'm done with my workout, I basically jump in for 3 minutes at 5:30 in the morning, and then basically get going. I'm at HQ at 6.
Nice. That's awesome. That's two very good stress relievers, cold plunge and exercise. I think exercise is Like, and when I say exercise, I don't just mean gym or boot camp. I mean going out and walking in nature, hiking, running. It is the most underutilized antidepressant.
Oh yeah,
You know,
100%.
And food, ironically, is the most overutilized. I'm not going to call it an antidepressant, but used to manage depression. Food and, of course, drugs and vices. But anyways, if people just realized how valuable that fitness was in terms of the dopamine response. I was talking to Andrew, my son, about this the other day because he's like, Dad, there's so many ways to get dopamine. Like you can get it through social media. If someone likes your stuff, well, you get a video or a post that goes viral, you get a dopamine hit. When you work out, you have a great workout, you're just like feeling so good, dopamine hit. When if you're drugged up, chemically enhanced, you get a dopamine hit. I go, so are they all the same? He's like, well, he goes, I'm partial to think that the one where you actually earned it through exercising, and he used those words, earned it through exercising. He goes, I'm partial to think that that's probably a better one. And I said, I think it is. And it's because you also get serotonin from it, right? Because the feeling of accomplishment versus, oh, I just did a drug or had a shot of whiskey or whatever, and I got this rush of dopamine. Or I won a lottery, whatever. I won $500 on the lottery scratch off, dopamine hit. My post went viral, dopamine hit. But when you earn it over time, man, that's dopamine and serotonin. Like that is the anti-stress drug right there.
That is it. So true.
Yeah. So it's cool to hear a 17-year-old say that. I'm like, all right, he's going to be all right.
Well, he's had a little bit of influence from a legend that I know, so that probably added to that.
Thank you. A couple more questions because both, and I know how important this is to you, but I'm hoping that you can articulate why it's so important because both you and I are byproducts. We're, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say we're personal development junkies. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I'm addicted to know, KNOW, always trying to be better, evolve better.
Yeah. Why? So why is personal development important to you as a human, to you as a husband, to you as a leader, to... Why? I mean, you're pretty well developed. You run an amazing organization. You're fit. You're athletic. Like, why still searching out for greater levels of personal development?
Well, I think it has to come down with fulfillment. I'm a really big believer that you're either growing or you're dying. And Tony Robbins says this: progress equals motivation. And you don't necessarily have to be the richest person to be fulfilled and happy, but you need to be on that path. Yeah. Because once you start progressing, you become more motivated and inspired. And we see this at, from a clientele perspective at our Fit Body Bootcamp locations. The look in someone's eye, they still have a long way to go, but they lost that first 10 pounds, that first 15 pounds, that first 20 pounds. That could be very addictive in a positive way. And, I would say I'm an addict by nature for the good and the bad. And I'm addicted to becoming better. And there's certainly the serotonin, the dopamine that goes along with that. But I also, taking a step back, looking at big picture, dude, we got one shot this thing, man. Yeah. There's no promises, right? There's no promises. You've had 48 spins, I've had 39 spins, and that could end tomorrow, touch wood. But hopefully it doesn't. And I know you're very similar to this MEB. When I look back at my life, I want to look back and say, man, I gave that a shot. I put everything on the field. And it's interesting. I was teaching at Matt Wilbur's Domination Workshop, and similar to you, high eagle, cut from a winner's mentality cloth. And I like to win. You like to win. But interestingly enough, and what I shared from a vulnerability perspective, I can actually be okay with not winning. The only caveat is I need to look back at my performance and know that I did every single thing possible. There was no stone that was not unturned. If I can say that, I'm good. But if I can't say that, if there was one more thing I could have done, there was one more rep I could have made, if there was one more call I could have done, if there was one more presentation for my team that I could have executed that put my team and our team in a winning position, and I didn't do that, I can't live with that. So for me, that growth, that constant evolution, it all factors into that, living a life well lived, impacting humanity in a positive way.
Well said. Very well said. And a final question from your seat as a CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp. Where do you see Fit Body in the next 3 and 5 years?
The beautiful thing is we're just getting started, B. Yeah. Holy smokes. We're in a rocket ship, and this thing is in launch right now, and it's only going to get quicker, higher, and faster. We will be the premier household name in fitness. We'll be known way more than just a fitness and fat loss program, a nutrition coaching program, a mindset program. We will be known as a personal development program that has this ripple effect that impacts households and organizations and families and nations. That's my vision.
I love that. And I share that vision with you. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Fitness CEO podcast. By the way, I know you like this new setup that we've got, and thank you because you've watched, you've listened. We've upgraded the setup, and we appreciate you guys staying engaged, sharing these episodes. And Bryce, thank you for making time to allow me to interview you, our fearless leader. And guys, if you got value from this episode, and I know you did, please like, share, and leave a comment. Let's get the engagement going here. And of course, go out and flip that switch in your life. Make the change necessary, and we'll see you next time.